Welcome to Science and Wisdom Live, where scientists and meditators meet.
I wanted to start off the dialogue with a question to Dr. Rovelli, and talking a little bit about your last book. In your last book, you talked about Niels Bohr, who famously said that anyone who isn't shocked by quantum theory hasn't understood it. And quantum mechanics is so precise in its predictions, but physicists still have a really hard time agreeing on what the theory tells us about the world. There are even a lot of physicists who decline to give any interpretation of what quantum physics says about the world. So in your last book, Helgoland, you suggest that the ideas of the Indian scholar Nagarjuna can be useful to understanding quantum theory's real-world applications. Can you explain a little bit why a Buddhist philosopher from 2 millennia ago, why his ideas are still relevant to modern science?
Thank you, Scott. You want a short answer or a long answer? How long do you want?
Medium answer.
Medium. Yes, I do think, at least, it has been so for me that my encounter with Nagarjuna has helped me to get some clarity, what seems to me a little bit of more clarity about quantum theory. I've found even much more than that in the book of Nagarjuna, but that has been my my entry point. It has been slow for me because let me put it this way: I studied quantum mechanics in the 70s as a student. It seemed all clear to me. I read the books, I did the exercises, I could compute. And a number of years later, talking and thinking and under the influence of a lot of people, I realized that that was totally wrong. I was not understanding quantum mechanics. So this started a process of trying to make sense of it, that slowly, through various passages, became the relational interpretation of quantum mechanics. The core of the problem is the following, the way I understand it. That in classical mechanics, we can't think at an external reality, at the world we interact with, as a set of system or object with properties. It doesn't need to be naive materialists. We don't need to be particle and stones and things like that. But we can think of the world by breaking it in systems, and each system has a property. It's itself. It's characterized, and quantum physics, surprisingly, very surprisingly, seems to block us from doing so, because the way it's constructed is not as a description of properties of things, but as a description of how things affect us when we interact with them. And in the language of quantum mechanics, this is a language of the observer, the measurement, the measurement apparatus that interact with the system. The point is that quantum mechanics describe what happened in these measurements, but doesn't describe what happened between these measurements. So we have a system and observer, and something happened between the two. The observer gets some information about the system. And then it happens again, and quantum mechanics tell us what's going to happen next and next and next at this interaction, but nothing about what happened in between. And if you try to fill in what happened in between, you're forced to very funny stories. Either, like Heisenberg, you say, well, nothing happens in between. There are only these interactions. Or, like in the Schrödinger first version of quantum mechanics, you have to think that things spread out and have all sorts of properties together at the same time. For instance, typically an electron always manifests itself as a particle being in a point, but in the theory, you cannot think that between one manifestation and the other, it is somewhere, and you describe it as a wave opening up in space. So this is the famous particle-wave duality of quantum theory. So why cannot we think of the world made by system with properties? That's a key point. Are we sort of missing some deep underlying reality where there is stuff with properties, but we're always seeing part of it? This is where the different way of thinking about quantum mechanics open up. And it seemed to me that the main observation, that's what led me this way of thinking, is that we should ask not only what is the quantum system we're describing, but also what is the observer. Who is this observer? And I believe, because of my culture, that the observer is also a quantum system. And if I'm an observer, you, Scott, can observe me. And for you, I'm a system. So I'm at the same time an observer and a system. So therefore, when an object manifests myself to me, this manifestation, since you're not interacting with me and the object, only happens relative to me and not relative to you. And if this is the central idea of relational quantum mechanics, if one uses this idea, suddenly the entire picture makes sense, because we think of the world of interacting things which don't have properties by themselves, only have properties relative to one another. And if we try to make the overall story doesn't fit together. But then, so this is relational quantum mechanics. But then what does it mean that a system has no properties? I mean, what does it mean? A particle has no position, no velocity, no angular momentum, no energy, nothing, unless interact with it. What is it? Okay. It seems there's nothing there, nothing to talk about. And this is the point in which I read Nagarjuna, because everybody was listening to me talking about quantum mechanics and asked me, have you read Nagarjuna? And I was very skeptical of going that direction, because some older attempts to connect Indian or Chinese philosophy with modern science, I was not impressed by them. So I resisted the idea. But then somehow everybody was asking me, have you read Nagarjuna? So I read Nagarjuna. And for me, it was a shock. It was a shock because it opened up a number of remarkable ideas. First of all, the idea that not only to talk about a relation between things, you can't talk without the two things having independent reality by themselves. But even more than that, when you talk about relation, this is the genius of Nagarjuna, you're forced to think that the actual entity in relation do not have reality by themselves. This was a shock for me, because in a sense it says, well, this is exactly the way of thinking that one needs to be able to talk about systems that manifest itself to one another without need of thinking them of existence by themselves outside this manifestation. And that is the first step. So I found Nagarjuna tool, a conceptual tool. Obviously, Nagarjuna didn't know anything about quantum physics, obviously, right? That's not the point. But a conceptual tool in which it's liberating with respect to the prejudice about reality, which I felt was strong in our mind, which was blocking us from being comfortable with quantum mechanics. But then I found much more than that. And and that's, I just close this with this point. What really impressed me in Nagarjuna is his radicality in questioning any attempt to find a starting point, a fixed ground, a solid ground upon which to build our understanding of reality. The entire book is, in a sense, it's all negative. It's not this, not this, not this, not that. And this is this captured me completely, because it's not only don't try to think the objects by themselves, but it's also don't ask the wrong question, which is what is ultimate reality. Somehow Nagarjuna uses the same distinction between apparent conventional reality and ultimate reality that this morning Michel Bitbol in such an articulate way discussed and used and questioned, but it dissolves it by saying that the ultimate reality, there is a sense in which the ultimate reality is not there. The game of trying to say what it is, the ultimate reality, is a wrong game. And that I found it wonderful. Nagarjuna is not negating the world or the useful of the conventional notion of reality. I can say these are really my glasses. I mean, I don't think Nagarjuna would object to that, but he would object to take that in a sense of ultimate reality. And stronger than that, he would object that, it seems to me, to object to the idea that the mind is the ultimate reality, which is something a scientist doesn't like, because I want to understand the mind in terms of something else. Nor language is the ultimate reality, nor matter is the ultimate reality, nor God is the ultimate reality. And this doesn't leave us in the confusion. It leaves us in incredible, beautiful, clear, open space where I myself am not an entity anymore. My glasses are not an entity anymore, and nevertheless I can keep talking about myself and the glasses. This is what I loved about the book, and that's how it took away what I felt were sort of metaphysical prejudices that were blocking the way of understanding these things that we see about the world, which is quantum physics.
And even a physicist can have a metaphysical prejudice.
Oh, yeah, of course, we all.
Geshe, can you, that was quite a tour of the relationship between quantum physics and Nagarjuna's ideas of emptiness, dependent origination, interdependence. Could you respond to that? And also, as you do, if you wouldn't mind giving a small introduction to people who aren't familiar with the Buddhist idea of emptiness or dependent origination.
Yeah, first, before maybe go into that, I want to first congratulate Carlo Rovelli with his understanding of Nagarjuna's form of philosophy. Just looking at the previous presentations and dialogue, that very interesting that Professor John Dunne, who is most favorable philosopher, so to say, is Dharmakirti, and that follows mainly the Sumatra school of thought, or the mind-only school. And Dr. Michel Bitbol is more inclined to the level of the quantum interpretation of Buddhism, which is very, very similar. Yeah, I was very impressed with the dialogue because the two views are very, very similar. And then Carlo Rovelli starts not arguing, but in a kind of way of but, and referring to Nagarjuna's form of philosophy that the mind itself is also empty of inherent existence. And it's not only that the world reflects in the observer, but the observer is also part of the world, right? So then we go a step further than the interpretation of you can call it Cubism or the mind-only school interpretation of philosophy. So yeah, I was very impressed with that kind of comment that, Carlo already in a short period of time got quite a good understanding of Nagarjuna's philosophy, right? So that's, first of all, thank you for that. Yeah, so then it's true, Arya Nagarjuna basically talks about, interdependence, and with interdependence, we prove this nature of emptiness or ultimate reality. So we have two types of reality. We have a conventional one, and we have an ultimate one. And they actually, in the nature of dependent origination, they're two sides of a coin. They're two different realities to be described, but one proves the other. So how does that work? How can those two aspects of reality, for example, the pen itself or the glasses, has different aspects, right? Has a shape, a color. That's kind of a conventional aspect we perceive with our eye perception. Then also the pen has also a nature of interdependence, and interdependence cause and effect. That's also a property of the pen, right? That it changes moment by moment. Yeah, so that's one level of interdependence that actually proves that the pen cannot exist all by itself. It depends on things other than itself. That's true for its production, that's true for its disintegration, and that's true for its final kind of stages that is disintegrated. Yeah, it depends on something else than itself. So as Carlo just indicated, that the particles don't have really properties. It's the event between particles that has the property, right? So in a similar way, the pen being in the nature of interdependence of cause and effect relationships proves that the pen doesn't exist from its own side, because it comes into being by causal and conditions other than itself. It disintegrates by certain kind of temperatures, for example, to its full extent as completely disintegrated by causes and conditions other than itself. So there's a correlation between interdependence of the pen, which proves that the pen doesn't exist all by itself, right? So what we call emptiness is empty of something. Yeah, we're talking about a lack or an absence of something. For example, you know, I always use the example of the elephant. It's a very famous example in Buddhist philosophy that the room is empty of an elephant, right? So that means the elephant doesn't exist in the room, but the absence of the elephant exists, right? So that's why Nagarjuna and many forms in philosophy, we talk about what it's not to understand what it is. Yeah, so that's why there's a lot of use of negativities. So that means emptiness means an absence of something, right? So the lack of an elephant, but also when we talk about emptiness from the point of view of ultimate reality, then we say empty of inherent existence, right? So that the pen doesn't exist from its own side because it's dependent on cause and conditions. So that's one level of the pen origination, cause and conditions, which is a conventional truth, which proves the ultimate truth. Yeah, you can see that, and because it's empty of inherent existence, that's why there's possibility for correlation and cause and effect. Yeah, so that's the first level, so to say, of conventional truth that proves the ultimate one. Yeah, and the second level of conventional truth, according to the interpretation of Nagarjuna, is that, you know, not only cause and effect, but also the dependence on individual parts within the object, the pen, right? There's kind of the different direction and different parts you can take out, you know, the cover and the top and the different kind of little kind of particles of the ink, etc., etc. So that means there's a huge collection of particles and a collection of those individual particles. And there's a correlation between those two. Because that correlation between those two is present, that's why the particles don't exist from their own side, neither the collection does exist from its own side, right? So that's very similar to what Carlo Rovelli just indicated, that the event between particles is of more interest than the individual particles themselves, because they describe more what reality is rather than the individual particles. So in that way, also the two levels of cause and effect, as well as parts, individual parts, and a collection of parts proves that nothing can exist from its own side. There is no pen that exists from its own side without that dependence. So we say the pen is empty of inherent existence, is empty from existing from its own side because it bends cause and conditions, it bends individual parts and a collection of parts, right? So that's what we call the second level of conventional reality of dependent origination. There's also a third level of dependent origination, and that Carlo Rovelli already get a quite good idea when I read his book Helgoland, how he was describing a chair, right? So very similar, that if you see what we call a pen is based upon a particular basis that is suitable to be called a pen, having all the right features of able to write, hold it in a particular way, etc., etc. So having all those kind of features or qualities, so to say, produces the idea, okay, this we impute as a pen, or this we impute as an electron, depend on how the electron, for example, reacts with its environment, and we see the properties, and then we say, okay, this we classify as an electron, right? So then we come to the conclusion that actually it's just a mere imputation based upon a particular property in relation with this environment that we say, oh, we call it this. So because things are in the nature of this interdependence of mere imputation, yeah, that even emptiness itself is imputed in the sense that emptiness doesn't exist all from its own side. When I say emptiness of the pen, that depends on the pen itself, right? Emptiness is always related with an object, and that object is empty of inherent existence, and that's what we call the emptiness of that particular object. So even to the level of emptiness itself, there is this dependence, right? There is this dependence on objects, which is empty of what, and which object is empty of what, in the sense that the object, the pen, is empty of inherent existence. right? So there also, again, we see an interdependence. So that proves, in short, to cut it short, that there's three levels of dependent origination. Of course, an effect, relationships, parts and a collection of parts, as well as merely imputed by the mind, right? That those three levels of which are all three conventional realities, they prove the ultimate reality that nothing exists from its own side. Yeah, so it's actually two sides of a coin, because everything is empty when they're in existence, and that's why things are imputed. That's why there's a correlation between parts and a collection of parts. That's why cause and effect is there, and the other way around as well. So in that, if you look in that way, then you can see that everything is kind of in this nature of interdependence of cause and effect, part and collection of parts, and mere imputation. And then you come to a very similar conclusion, as Carlo Rovelli kindly indicated in his book, Helgoland, where is actually the chair? Of course, conventionally there's a chair there, right? Which has particular properties of being hard and suitable to sit on, etc., etc. But actually, if you look for it, it's not in the arm rests, it's not in the individual parts, it's not in the collection, it's just imputed upon a mere collection of individual parts that is a suitable base to be called a chair, right? So that also, you can see many different levels of interdependence plays a role, and we cannot actually find an inherent chair out there. But on the conventional level, it exists, right? Yeah. Yeah, so that's a little bit kind of, yeah, very similar to Carlo Rovelli was talking about, so to say. Yeah.